Welcome to David's Stories. Today we follow Thaddeus Brooks, a retired prosecutor who inherits millions only to uncover his daughter's plot to drug him and seize it all. He turns the tables with cold justice. Subscribe and hit the bell for weekly videos uncovering betrayal and truth. Share your thoughts below. Let's start the stories. I was walking out of Amber Foster's office on Spring Street with the kind of lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. The late morning sun warmed the back of my neck, and the manila folder in my hand felt heavier than its actual weight. 3 sheets of paper, 1 signature, and suddenly I owned more than I'd ever imagined possible. A villa on the oceanfront in Malibu. 2 condominiums in Santa Monica. $4.2 million worth of real estate that had belonged to my brother James, a man I hadn't spoken to in nearly 3 years. And now it belonged to me. I remember the exact moment the numbers sank in. I was standing on the sidewalk waiting for the crosswalk light, and I pulled my reading glasses from my shirt pocket to double-check the page. There it was in black and white. To my brother Thaddeus Brooks. I leave my entire estate, followed by the addresses and the appraised values. My hand trembled just enough that I had to steady the paper against my thigh. 67 years old. 2 years into a prosecutor's pension that barely covered the property taxes on my little Pasadena bungalow, and now I was a millionaire. The word felt ridiculous in my mouth, like a costume that didn't fit. James had added a note at the bottom of the will. Amber had pointed it out with a small professional smile. For the brother who always did the right thing. I read it 3 times before the words blurred. Something hot pressed behind my eyes, and I had to look away up at the smog-softened sky to keep from making a scene on a downtown sidewalk. James remembered. After all the silence, the distance, the separate lives we'd built, he remembered who I'd tried to be. I folded the documents, carefully slid them back into the folder, and tucked it under my arm like contraband. My old Buick was parked 2 blocks away, and the walk felt shorter than it should have. Every step carried a plan. First, I'd tell Megan, my daughter. 38 years old, sharp as a tack when she wanted to be, but lately she and Arnold had been living with me for 8 months. Bad investments, they'd said. A rough patch. I never pressed for details. Fathers don't knot when their kids are sleeping on the pull-out couch and eating your groceries. I'd watched my retirement savings shrink by the month, 500 here, 1,000 there, never complaining because that's what you do. You hold the line. You keep the lights on. You believe that family is the one thing money can't buy. But now everything would change. I rehearsed the words as I merged onto the 110. Nothing dramatic. No sweeping gestures. Just James left me some property. A house in Malibu, 2 condos. We're going to be okay. Simple, understated. The kind of news that lands gently and then spreads like warmth through the whole house. I pictured Megan's face, those hazel eyes widening the way she used to look when I brought home a good report card in elementary school. I imagined Arnold shaking his head in disbelief, maybe even clapping me on the back. Family taking care of family, I thought. That's how it's supposed to work. The traffic was thick, but I didn't mind. It gave me time to build the moment in my head. I'd park in the driveway, walk in through the front door like always, and call out Megan, Arnold. You home? They'd be in the living room. Arnold probably pretending to read the business section. Megan scrolling through her phone with that distracted frown she'd worn for months. I'd set the folder on the coffee table, let them open it themselves. Let them see the numbers. Let them feel the shift. I even thought about the condos. One for them, maybe. The smaller one on Ocean Avenue, 2 bedrooms, ocean view, walking distance to the pier. They could start over, pay off whatever debts were keeping them up at night. Arnold could stop making those tense phone calls from the backyard. Megan could smile again without that tightness around her mouth. And me, I'd keep the villa. Not to live in full-time, of course. Too big for one old man, but weekends, holidays, a place to take future grandchildren if they ever came. I allowed myself a small privet grin at the thought. Grandchildren. The word tasted like possibility. Pasadena appeared around me like a familiar song. The tree-lined streets, the craftsman houses with their wide porches and faded shutters. My block came into view, and there was the house blue paint peeling at the corners, the lawn more brown than green despite my half-hearted attempts with the sprinkler. My modest retirement palace, Arnold had once joked. I almost laughed out loud. Not for long. I turned onto the street and slowed. The driveway was empty. Arnold's car must be in the shop again, so I eased the Buick up to the curb instead. Old habit. I didn't want to block anyone. The folder sat on the passenger seat like a sleeping cat. I picked it up, got out and closed the door with a soft click. The air smelled like jasmine and warm asphalt. A perfect Friday in late spring. That's when I heard the voices. The living room window was open. Unusual. We usually kept the house sealed against the heat, especially midday. But there it was, curtains pushed aside, screen removed, and two voices drifting out clear as a courtroom recording. Megan and Arnold. Tense, urgent. Not the casual bickering I'd grown used to. Something else. I froze with my hand on the garden gate. If Dad finds out about our debts, he'll throw us out. We can't let that happen. Megan's voice. That whining edge I'd heard too often lately. My stomach tightened. He won't find out. We stick to the plan. Arnold. Flat, emotionless. Like he was discussing a business merger. I should have called out. Should have walked up the steps, pushed open the door, and demanded to know what the hell they were talking about. But something some prosecutor's instinct, honed over 35 years, held me back. I eased the gate closed without latching it, and moved quietly along the side of the house, staying low behind the overgrown azalea bushes that scratched at my sleeves. The branches were thick enough to hide me, but not so dense that I couldn't hear. Tomorrow you drive him to that psychiatrist I told you about. Guy'll write whatever we need for $1,500 cash. My breath stopped. Psychiatrist. What if he refuses to go? Dad's stubborn. He'll ask questions. Then we slip something in his coffee. Sedative. Easy. The words hit like punches. I gripped my car keys so hard the metal bit into my palm. My own daughter. My own daughter talking about drugging me, declaring me incompetent, taking everything. Once he's in the nursing home, no one listens to old people anyway. His house, his assets, all ours through guardianship. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The azaleas pressed against my back, holding me in a crouch that made my knees scream. But I stayed. I listened. And what about the inheritance? He mentioned. James left him properties. That villa and those apartments. They knew. They'd been listening to my calls, going through my mail. The violation cut deeper than the conspiracy itself. That's why we move tomorrow. Get him declared incompetent. Establish guardianship. Transfer everything. The psychiatrist knows the script: depression, memory loss, inability to manage finances. Judge'll sign off within a week. What if someone questions it? His friends. What friends? The man's a hermit. Retired prosecutor who spends his days reading old case files and watching game shows. Nobody's going to fight for him. The assessment stung because it was true. I'd let relationships atrophy. Focused on work for so long that retirement had left me adrift. Alone. Except for Megan. I'd thought at least I had Megan. He's still my father. Her voice wavered. A crack in the armor. He's an obstacle. Arnold's response came sharp. Final, $1,500 for the psychiatrist. Maybe another $1,000 for the lawyer. Small price for $4 million in property. Silence. Then Megan, quieter, no. You're right. We do this tomorrow. I backed away one careful step at a time. My mind had already shifted into prosecutor mode, cataloging evidence, analyzing charges, building the case. Elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, unlawful drugging. The statutes lined up neatly in my head like soldiers at attention. I reached the car. eased the door open without a sound and slid behind the wheel. The engine started with a whisper. In the rearview mirror, the house looked exactly the same: blue shutters, overgrown lawn, the life I thought I knew. My hands gripped the steering wheel hard enough to make the leather creak. Megan's voice echoed. "He's still my father," said like an inconvenience, not a bond. "Arnold's? He's an obstacle." I pulled away from the curb and drove without destination, just distance. The streets of Pasadena blurred past while my mind worked systematically. No confrontation yet. Confrontation required leverage, evidence, a strategy that guaranteed victory. I'd spent 35 years in courtrooms. I knew how to build a case. They wanted to declare me incompetent, drug me, warehouse me while they liquidated my life. The inheritance James left me, the validation I'd felt an hour ago in Amber Foster's office, now became something else entirely. Ammunition. I stayed crouched behind those damn azaleas longer than my knees wanted to forgive me. The branches scratched at my forearms, but the sting barely registered. Every word from that open window was a separate blade sliding between my ribs, and I couldn't move until I'd felt the full cut. Megan's voice came first, higher than usual, threaded with that nervous whine I'd mistaken for stress about money. "If Dad finds out about our debts, he'll throw us out. We can't let that happen, Arnold. We can't." Arnold answered the way he always did, when he thought no one important was listening, flat, transactional, like he was closing a deal on a used car. "He won't find out. We stick to the plan." Plan. The word lodged in my throat. I'd used it 1,000 times in courtrooms, the defendant's plan, the co-conspirator's plan, but never once had it been aimed at me. I pressed my back harder against the siding, the rough stucco biting through my shirt, anchoring me to the moment, so I wouldn't float away on the shock. Megan again, lower now, almost pleading. "Tomorrow you drive him to that psychiatrist I told you about. Guy'll write whatever we need for 1,500 cash." 1,500. I could hear the cash register in Arnold's head. My prosecutor's brain cataloged it instantly. Bribery of a medical professional, California Penal Code 67.5. I hated how quickly the statutes rose to the surface like muscle memory from a life spent putting people away for less. Arnold didn't miss a beat. "What if he refuses to go? Dad's stubborn. He'll ask questions." Stubborn. The word should have made me proud. Instead, it felt like an obituary. Then we slipped something in his coffee. Sedative. Easy. Easy. He said it the way another man might say, "Pass the salt." My fingers tightened around the car keys until the jagged edge drew a bead of blood I didn't feel. I pictured the kitchen, my kitchen morning light slanting across the Formica table, where I'd eaten breakfast with Megan when she was 6, her legs swinging from the chair, ketchup on her chin. The same table where Arnold now planned to drug me. Megan's voice cracked. "Once he's in the nursing home, no one listens to old people anyway. His house, his assets, all ours through guardianship." Guardianship. Another word I knew too well. I'd seen it weaponized in elder abuse cases, loving children turned vultures the minute the parent couldn't fight back. I'd put sons and daughters in prison for exactly this. The irony tasted metallic. I shifted my weight. A twig snapped. I froze. Inside Arnold's footsteps crossed the room. Heavy, deliberate. I held my breath until my lungs burned. Megan again excited, now the wine replaced by something greedy and bright. "And what about the inheritance?" he mentioned. "James left him properties. That villa and those apartments. They knew. Of course they knew." I'd taken that call from Amber in the home office, door cracked because the AC was out. They'd been listening. Or Megan had gone through the mail on the counter, my mail, while I was in the shower. The violation hit harder than the conspiracy. My own house had become hostile territory. Arnold's voice dropped to a murmur, but the window carried it perfectly. "That's why we move tomorrow. Get him declared incompetent, establish guardianship, transfer everything." I could picture him pacing, hands in his pockets, calculating. The psychiatrist knows the script: depression, memory loss, inability to manage finances. Judge'll sign off within a week. Megan hesitated. What if someone questions it? His friends, Arnold snorted. What friends? The man's a hermit. Retired prosecutor who spends his days reading old case files and watching game shows. Nobody's going to fight for him. The accuracy of it burned. I was a hermit. I'd chosen case files over dinner parties, courtroom victories over birthday barbecues. My Christmas card list had shrunk to 3 names, and one of them was the dentist. I'd told myself it was the job. Now I saw it for what it was: isolation. A vulnerability they'd mapped like a weakness in a defense. Megan's voice softened, almost tender. He's still my father. The words should have been a lifeline. Instead, they felt like a eulogy. Arnold cut her off. He's an obstacle. Obstacle. Not Dad, not Thaddeus, not even the old man. Just something in the way of what they wanted. I felt the last thread of hope snap inside my chest. 1,500 for the psychiatrist. Maybe another 1,000 for the lawyer who handles guardianship. Small price for $4 million in property. Silence stretched. I could hear the refrigerator hum through the open window, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. Then Megan, quieter, resigned. No, you're right. We do this tomorrow. Tomorrow. 24 hours to dismantle my life. I'd spent decades making sure criminals had less time than that to cover their tracks. The absurdity almost made me laugh, would have, if my throat hadn't closed. I backed away 1 inch at a time, careful not to rustle the leaves. My knees screamed, but I kept my weight on the balls of my feet, the way I'd learned staking out witnesses in my ADA days. When I reached the corner of the house, I straightened slowly, blood rushing back into my legs with 1,000 needles. The folder was still tucked under my arm. I looked down at it. James's last gift, now the bait in a trap I hadn't seen coming. I walked to the Buick on legs that didn't feel like mine, opened the door without a sound, and slid inside. The interior smelled like old coffee, and the pine tree air freshener Megan had hung from the mirror as a joke 6 months ago. Dad, your car smells like a courthouse bathroom. I'd laughed then. I didn't laugh now. I started the engine as quietly as the old V6 allowed, and pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, the house shrank. Blue shutters, sagging gutters. The life I'd thought was mine. My hands shook on the wheel, but my mind was already racing ahead, building the case I'd need to survive this. Elder. Abuse. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Administering a controlled substance with intent to commit a felony. I recited the charges like a rosary. Each one carried 3 to 4 years, maybe more, if the DA pushed for consecutive sentencing. I'd done it myself, watched defendants' faces crumple when the numbers stacked up. Now the defendant would be my daughter. I drove without direction, letting the familiar streets of Pasadena unspool around me. Colorado Boulevard. The library where I'd taken Megan for story time when she was 4. The park where she'd learned to ride a bike, training wheels, clattering my hands on the seat, her laughter ringing like bells. Every memory felt poisoned, now overlaid with the conversation I'd just heard. I pulled over beneath a jacaranda tree petals, drifting onto the windshield like purple snow. My phone buzzed, Stanley Morrison, returning my voicemail from earlier, before the notary, before everything tilted. I let it ring out. I needed silence to think. Evidence. That was the problem. An overheard conversation, no recording, no witnesses. Hearsay. Inadmissible. Any defense attorney worth their retainer would shred it in 5 minutes. Your word against theirs, Mr. Brooks. And who sounds more credible, a devoted daughter or a bitter old man I'd prosecuted cases like this? The Martinez case: son drugged his mother, forged power of attorney, drained her accounts. We'd only caught him because a neighbor installed a nanny cam. The Chen guardianship fraud: similar pattern, similar solution. You don't arrest people for planning crimes. You arrest them for committing them. Which meant I had to let them proceed. The thought settled cold and clear in my chest. Let them take me to the corrupt psychiatrist. Let them try to drug me. Let them file the fraudulent paperwork. Every action would be evidence. Every step would tighten the noose. I pulled out the small leather-bound notepad I'd carried for decades, habit from casework, and wrote 4 items in precise handwriting. Record future conversations, voice-activated devices. Document contact with psychiatrist photos, recordings, payment evidence. Capture drugging attempt camera in kitchen witness if possible. Coordinate with police at exact right moment. California Penal Code 368, PC 82, PC 532. I could recite the statutes from memory along with typical sentences. 3 to 4 years imprisonment, restitution, permanent criminal records. I checked my watch. An hour since I'd left the house. They probably thought I was running errands, picking up milk, maybe a lottery ticket like I did every Friday. Good. Let them stay comfortable. I scrolled to Stanley's number. My old partner from the DA's office, now in private practice. We'd put away more elder fraud rings than I could count. If anyone understood this, he would. The phone rang twice. Stanley Morrison. Stanley, it's Thaddeus Brooks. I need your legal expertise on a criminal matter. How soon can you meet? His tone shifted instantly. Thad, everything all right? You sound no. Not a hypothetical. Active conspiracy to commit elder fraud. I'm the target. Silence, says. Then someone's targeting you. Wait, elder fraud. You're the victim. His voice climbed half an octave. I can meet you in 30 minutes. My office. Don't do anything until we talk. I won't. I'm thinking like a prosecutor now, not a victim. I hung up and looked at the notepad again. The jacaranda petals had stopped falling. The sun was lower, slanting gold through the windshield. Somewhere in that house, my daughter was probably making dinner, refining their scheme, counting money that wasn't theirs yet. They'd called me an obstacle. Fine. Obstacles don't just disappear. Sometimes they become walls you can't climb. Sometimes they become traps you don't see until it's too late. I started the engine and headed toward Colorado Boulevard, where Stanley's office waited. 20 minutes to organize the facts. 20 minutes to transform family tragedy into a prosecutable case. The prosecutor in me was awake now, and he was pissed. I drove for another 6 blocks before the shaking in my hands eased enough to trust the wheel. The jacaranda petals had given way to ordinary asphalt, and the ordinary felt obscene. I needed air that didn't smell like betrayal, so I turned into Memorial Park, the same one where Megan had learned to pump her legs on the swings when she was 5. The parking lot was nearly empty on a weekday afternoon, a couple of joggers, an old man walking a collie, the distant squeak of a playground. I chose a bench beneath an ancient oak far enough from the laughter that it wouldn't mock me. I sat with my head in my hands for the first minute, letting the enormity wash over me in waves. My daughter, the little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest during Sunday football, whose crayon drawings I'd taped to the fridge until the paper curled, planning to drug me into a nursing home. The image kept looping, her small hand slipping a pill into my coffee. Arnold counting cash for a doctor who'd never met me. I pressed my palms against my eyes until I saw sparks. Then something shifted. The prosecutor's mind, dormant for 2 years but never truly retired, clicked on like a courtroom light. I straightened, folded my hands the way I used to before addressing a jury, and looked at the situation the way I'd looked at 1,000 cases. Evidence. That was everything. What did I actually have? An overheard conversation. No recording, no witnesses. My word against theirs. Any defense attorney would eviscerate it. Hearsay, Your Honor. The ramblings of a lonely old man. I'd seen it happen. I'd made it happen. I pulled out the leather notepad again. The oak's shadow dappled the page as I wrote in the same precise block letters I'd used for 35 years. Record future conversations. Voice-activated devices. Document contact with psychiatrist. Photos, recordings, payment evidence. Capture drugging attempt. Camera in kitchen witness if possible. Coordinate with police at exact right moment. I underlined the last one twice. California Penal Code 368. Elder abuse. PC 182. Conspiracy. PC 347. Administering a controlled substance to aid a felony. I knew the sentences by heart, 3 to 4 years per count, possibly consecutive. I'd watched defendants' faces crumple when I read those numbers aloud. Now the defendant would wear my daughter's face. The thought should have broken me. Instead, it steadied me. I flipped to a fresh page and sketched a timeline. Tonight, plant recorders. Act normal. Drop the inheritance bait. Tomorrow morning, let them wake me. Let them drive me to the psychiatrist. Tomorrow afternoon, arrest all 3 with cash in hand and falsified documents. Every step had to be airtight. No early confrontation. No moral grandstanding. Just evidence. Just consequence. A soccer ball rolled across the grass and stopped against my shoe. A boy, maybe 8, ran up, cheeks flushed. "Sorry, mister." I handed it back. No harm done. He grinned and sprinted away. I watched him go, envying the simplicity of childhood. Megan had been that age once. I'd pushed her on those swings until my arms ached, promising her the world was safe because I was in it. The lie tasted bitter now. I checked my watch, 2:47 p.m. They'd expect me home by 4, maybe 5, errands, grocery run, the usual Friday routine. Good. Let them stay comfortable. Let them believe the plan was intact. I scrolled to Stanley's contact again. My thumb hovered. I could still call the police right now, report the conspiracy, have uniforms at the door within the hour. But then what Megan Tearful Arnold lawyered up, both claiming it was a misunderstanding. We were joking, Dad. We'd never hurt you. Without hard evidence, it would be my word against theirs. And in the eyes of a judge, a devoted daughter always wins. No. I needed them to act. I needed the drug in my cup, the cash changing hands, the fraudulent diagnosis on letterhead. Only then would the system I'd served for decades close the trap. I dialed Stanley. "Thad, where are you?" His voice carried the same courtroom bark I remembered. "Memorial Park. I need recorders, small, undetectable. And I need Danielle Chen on speed dial." Silence. "Then Jesus, you're serious. Dead serious." "They move tomorrow. I have maybe 18 hours. I've got 2 voice-activated units in my desk." Motion-triggered 15-foot radius time-stamped. California's a one-party consent state. You can record anything you're part of. "Perfect. I'll be at your office in 20. "Thad." His tone softened. "You sure you don't want to just confront them? Get them help. Help!" I laughed to sound like gravel. "They're planning to warehouse me in a facility where nobody asks questions." "This isn't a cry for help, Stanley. It's a felony in progress." Another pause. "See you in 20. I hung up and looked at the playground again. A mother lifted her toddler into a swing, the child's laughter bright as breaking glass. I wondered if that mother knew how fragile trust was, if she knew how quickly love could curdle into calculation. I stood. My knees protested, but I ignored them. The oak's shade felt cooler now, the sun lower. I had a war to prepare for, and the battlefield was my own home. As I walked to the car, I passed the collie again. The old man tipped his hat. I nodded back, wondering if he had children, wondering if they visited, wondering if he'd ever had to choose between love and survival. I slid behind the wheel and started the engine. The folder from Amber Foster sat on the passenger seat, its edges already creased from my grip. James's note peeked out. For the brother who always did the right thing. I tucked it away carefully. Tomorrow I'd do the right thing again, even if it destroyed what was left of my family. I pulled out of the lot, the oak shrinking in the rearview mirror. 18 hours, 2 recorders, 1 corrupt psychiatrist, 3 conspirators who thought they'd already won. They had no idea what was coming. I made it to Stanley's office in 19 minutes, flat, the Buick's tires chirping as I took the turn onto Colorado Boulevard a little faster than the speed limit allowed. The building was the same modest beige stucco I remembered, third-floor tinted windows reflecting the fading afternoon light. I parked in the back lot, grabbed the manila folder like a shield, and took the elevator up. The lobby smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and stale coffee, the kind of scent that clings to legal offices the way guilt clings to a defendant. Stanley met me at the door before I could knock. He hadn't changed much, medium-build dark hair graying at the temples, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow like he'd been elbow-deep in discovery all day. But his eyes, those sharp brown eyes that could spot a lie across a courtroom, held something new. Concern. Real concern. He pulled me inside and closed the door with a soft click that sounded final. Sit. Talk. He gestured to the leather chair across from his desk, then locked the door behind us. The room was exactly as I remembered, law books lining one wall, a dying ficus in the corner, framed photos of Stanley shaking hands with judges and DAs. One of them was me, 20 years younger, both of us grinning after the Martinez conviction. I looked at that younger version of myself and felt a pang. He still believed in happy endings. I started from the beginning, no embellishments, no drama. The call from Amber Foster, the drive home, the open window. Every word Megan and Arnold had spoken verbatim, the way I'd recited witness testimony 1,000 times. Stanley listened without interrupting, yellow legal pad on his knee pen moving in quick, precise strokes. When I finished, he set the pen down and exhaled through his teeth. Your own daughter. He caught himself, shook his head. All right, legal framework first. He stood, moved to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a drawer with the confidence of a man who knew exactly where everything was. In California, what they're planning hits multiple statutes. PC 182, conspiracy to commit fraud. PC 532, obtaining property through false pretenses. PC 368, elder abuse with intent to defraud. We're looking at 3 to 4 years per count, potentially consecutive if the DA's feeling aggressive. And they will be. Cops hate elder abuse. Judges hate it more. I leaned forward. I need evidence. Solid court-admissible evidence. Exactly. He opened a smaller drawer and pulled out 2 black devices, each no bigger than a matchbox. Voice-activated recorders. Motion-triggered 15-foot radius, crystal clear. Time-stamped files download to any USB. I use them for client meetings when I need backup. He handed them over. They were surprisingly light, almost weightless. California's a one-party consent state. You can record any conversation you're part of without their knowledge. Legal, admissible. I turned one over in my palm. The plastic was cool smooth. A tool of truth in a house built on lies. And the psychiatrist, I said. They're paying him $1,500 cash. That's bribery of a medical professional. Medical fraud. If I can photograph the exchange record, the conversation ironclad. Stanley pulled out his phone. I'm calling Danielle Chen. She needs to hear this directly from you. He dialed, switched to speaker. 3 rings, then a crisp, professional voice. Chen Fraud Division. Danielle, it's Stanley Morrison. I've got Thaddeus Brooks in my office. Former ADA Brooks. He's the victim in an active elder fraud conspiracy. Putting him on. A beat of silence. Then Mr. Brooks. I remember your work. What's the situation? I outlined it again, concise this time, the way I'd summarize for a grand jury. The inheritance, the overheard plan, the timeline. Chen asked pointed questions. Specific threats, evidence currently available. Resources of the conspirators. A good detective, thorough without wasting time. Here's how we'll proceed, she said finally. Gather recordings of them discussing the plan. Document any contact with medical professionals. If they attempt drugging, that's aggravated assault, call 911 immediately. I'll have a patrol unit on standby starting tomorrow morning. The moment you have actionable evidence, we move. What about the psychiatrist? I asked. If they meet him tomorrow, I'll run background checks tonight. See if any local psychiatrists have prior complaints. If we ID him before the meeting, that helps. But Mr. Brooks, a pause. You're walking into a dangerous situation. These are people who've already planned to drug you. Don't underestimate them. I smiled without humor. I spent 35 years prosecuting criminals, detective. I won't underestimate them. But they've already underestimated me. We ended the call. Stanley walked to a small office fridge, pulled out 2 bottles of water, handed me one. The gesture felt absurdly normal, like we were just colleagues catching up, not preparing to take down my family. You need to act completely natural when you go home, he said. They can't suspect you know anything. Can you do that? I thought about the thousands of witnesses I'd prepped, the defendants I'd watched lie under oath, the performances I'd evaluated in courtroom after courtroom. I can do that. Good. He handed me a business card, his cell number scrawled on the back. Anything seems wrong, anything escalates, you call immediately. Midnight, 3 a.m. Doesn't matter. I pocketed the recorders, slipped the card into my wallet, shook his hand. His grip was firm, the kind that meant partnership, not courtesy. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. Through the lobby windows, evening was settling over Pasadena street lights flickering on the sky, bruising purple. Somewhere in the city, Megan and Arnold were probably making dinner in my kitchen, refining their scheme, counting my money before they'd stolen it. I reached the Buick, sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. The recorders pressed against my chest pocket, small, hard instruments of justice. Tomorrow I'd return home and pretend nothing had changed. I'd smile at Megan, tolerate Arnold, drink coffee, eat breakfast while they watched for signs of weakness. They wanted a confused old man. I'd give them a performance worthy of an Oscar. Then I'd watch them destroy themselves, one recorded word at a time. I pulled into the driveway just as the sky faded from orange to deep indigo. The porch light was on Megan's doing, probably to sell the concerned daughter act. Before leaving the car, I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I practiced the smile of a man with good news to share, warm, open, just a touch bewildered by his own luck. The recorder in my shirt pocket pressed against my sternum like a second heartbeat. The front door opened before I could reach for my keys. Megan stood there, silhouette, framed by the hallway light, face morphing into instant concern. "Dad, you were gone so long. We were worried sick. You didn't answer your phone." Her voice pitched higher than usual, stress marker. "Where were you? Are you feeling all right? You look tired." I returned her hug, noting the tension in her shoulders, the way her arms barely squeezed before releasing. Arnold appeared behind her, rising from the couch with careful concern painted across his features. "Just drove around a bit after seeing Stanley," I said, moving past them into the living room. Needed to clear my head, thinking about James, the funeral arrangements, all of it. I kept my tone casual, deliberately vague. "Sorry I didn't call. Didn't mean to worry you. Stanley Morrison." "That's the lawyer, right?" Arnold's question came too quickly. "Testing. What kind of cases were you discussing?" "Anything we should know about." I smiled. Let it reach my eyes. Years of witness prep had taught me how to construct believable lies. Ancient history. Cases we worked together, people we knew at the DA's office. Old men reminiscing. I paused, let my gaze drift to the family photos on the mantel. Megan's graduation, our last Christmas with her mother. "He's doing well." "Asked about you two." Megan relaxed visibly. Arnold's shoulders dropped half an inch. "They believed me." Megan brightened. "I made chicken. We ate earlier than usual, 6 o'clock, but there's plenty left. You must be starving." The dining room table was set for 3. They'd waited, probably worried I'd discovered something, gone to the police. I sat in my usual chair, accepted the plate Megan brought, and waited until we'd all started eating. Then I dropped the bait. "Actually, I have incredible news." I paused, watching them. James left me his entire estate. Villa in Malibu, 2 condos in Santa Monica. The notary estimates it's worth close to $5 million. I inflated the number, deliberately make them reckless. "Can you believe it?" Arnold's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Megan's breath caught audibly. Under the table their hands found each other, silent communication passing between them like electricity. "That's incredible, Dad." Megan's voice trembled. 5 million. James really came through for you. A beat. For us, I corrected gently. You're my daughter. This changes things for all of us. I let hope color my tone, played the generous father. Maybe you two can finally get back on your feet. Maybe one of those Santa Monica condos could be yours. Arnold's pupils dilated, greed naked and unmistakable. That's generous, Thaddeus. Very generous. He set down his fork with careful precision. We appreciate everything you've done for us these past months. Past tense, as if I were already gone. After dinner, Megan cleared dishes while Arnold and I moved to the living room. I settled into my armchair, grabbed yesterday's newspaper as a prop. Natural movement took me past the bookshelf where I'd positioned the first recorder earlier behind the spine of a law dictionary. My hand brushed the wood fingers, finding the device. One press, silent activation. 2 seconds that looked like nothing. I opened the newspaper, appearing to read. Arnold moved to the window, pulled out his phone, dialed. His voice dropped low, but the recorder would catch everything within 15 feet. Dr. Martinez, Arnold Watson. Tomorrow, 10:00 a.m. Confirmed. My father-in-law. You'll evaluate him for competency issues. Provide the documentation we need. $1,500 in cash, as agreed. A pause. Don't worry, he won't suspect anything. Trusting old man. Each word landed in my mind like evidence tagged and bagged. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Bribery of a medical professional. Elder abuse. The charges stacked themselves neatly, ready for prosecution. Arnold pocketed his phone, returned to the couch. "Everything all right with your friend?" I asked, eyes still on the newspaper. "Business thing. Nothing important." He smiled. "Tomorrow's going to be a good day, Thaddeus. A really good day." Megan returned from the kitchen, dried her hands on a dish towel. "Dad, I was thinking tomorrow I should take you for a checkup. Just routine. You're at that age where regular medical visits are important." She tried to sound casual. Failed. "I already made an appointment for mid-morning." "That's thoughtful." I folded the newspaper, set it aside. "What time? 10 o'clock. Not too early. You can sleep in a bit." "Sounds perfect." I stood, stretched. "Think I'll turn in soon? Long day? Emotional day." "Of course, Dad." Megan moved to hug me again. "We're so happy for you. About the inheritance, about everything." I held her briefly, the stranger wearing my daughter's face. "I'm happy too, sweetheart. Things are finally looking up." In my peripheral vision, Arnold and Megan exchanged a glance. Satisfaction, victory assumed. I climbed the stairs slowly, portraying exhaustion. Behind me, their voices dropped to whispers too low for natural hearing, but the recorder would catch them. Inside my bedroom, I closed the door and waited. The evening continued, tension thick beneath normal conversation. I could hear them downstairs, moving through the house, their voices occasionally rising enough for fragments to drift up. Around 700. Footsteps on the stairs. A gentle knock. "Dad, I brought you chamomile tea, your favorite. Drink it while it's hot. It'll help you sleep." I opened the door, accepted the cup. Steam rose from the surface, and beneath it, barely visible, a slight cloudiness that didn't belong in pure chamomile. "You're so thoughtful." I smiled at her, this woman who'd grown inside my wife's body, who'd called me daddy until she was 12. "Thank you, sweetheart. Sleep well." She squeezed my arm, turned away. I closed the door, locked it quietly. The cup sat on my nightstand while I retrieved an empty glass water bottle from my closet, purchased yesterday, kept clean for exactly this purpose. I poured half the tea into the bottle, sealed it tight. Physical evidence. Chain of custody maintained. The remaining tea went down the bathroom sink in silence. Then I filled the cup halfway with tap water, swirled it to match the original level. Chamomile coloring from the residue made it look untouched. Now came the performance of my career. I opened the door again, carried the empty cup downstairs. Megan sat on the couch, Arnold beside her, both watching TV with manufactured calm. That was perfect. I set the cup on the coffee table, let myself sway slightly, caught the back of the armchair. "Wow, really tired? Here, Dad, let me help you." Megan jumped up, took my arm. Concern and calculation competed in her expression. "Come on, let's get you to bed." I leaned on her, playing the sedated man. My words came slightly slurred. "Strange, so tired all of a sudden. It's been an emotional day. The inheritance news. Everything." She guided me toward the stairs. Arnold appeared on my other side. Together they walked me up, their hands firm on my arms, escorts or captors. The line had blurred. In my bedroom I collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed. Let my eyes close, breathed deep and steady, feigning the first stages of drug sleep. "Is he out?" Arnold's whisper carried clearly. "Give it a few more minutes." Megan responded. "The dosage should work within 30. He'll be unconscious for at least 8 hours." They left, pulling my door almost closed. Footsteps retreated downstairs. I waited, counted to 300. Then I rose, silently moved to my closet, and retrieved my smartphone. Connected to the recorder via Bluetooth technology that would have seemed like science fiction in my early prosecutor days, now a standard tool. Through my earbuds, their voices came through crystal clear. "Can't believe he just drank it." Megan, nervous laughter. "I told you he wouldn't suspect." Trusting old fool. Arnold confident. "Tomorrow morning we wake him at 9 and get him dressed, drive him to Martina's office. One evaluation, 1,500 cash, and we've got documentation of mental incompetence. And then we file for emergency guardianship. My lawyer says we can have it granted within 72 hours given the medical evidence. Once that's done, we control everything. His bank accounts, the inheritance, all of it. What if he fights it? With what? Once Martinez signs those papers, your father's legally incompetent. His word means nothing. We sell the Malibu property immediately. 5 million. Cash buyers already waiting. Split it, pay off our debts. Our debts are almost 300,000, Arnold. The casino. We'll get paid. Then we're free. New start, new life." His voice hardened. "Your father was useful when we needed a place to stay. Now he's more useful as a source of funds. That's just reality. He's still my father. Weak protest ritual more than resistance. He's a means to an end. Don't get sentimental now. We've come too far." Silence. Then Megan. "You're right. We need this. We deserve this after everything." I sat in darkness, recording every word. Each sentence another nail in their legal coffin. Conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, attempted drugging, filing false medical documents. The charges multiplied. My phone vibrated. Text from Stanley Status. I typed quickly. Evidence captured. Drugging attempted. Physical sample preserved. Recording their full confession now. Appointment tomorrow, 10:00 a.m. at Dr. Martinez's office. Need address. His response came immediately. Sending Chen audio files now. We'll have address by morning. PD will be ready. Stay safe. I forwarded the audio through encrypted email. Subject evidence. Elder fraud conspiracy. Recipients Stanley Morrison. Detective Danielle Chen. Below. Arnold's voice continued through my earbuds. Guardianship grants us power of attorney. We make all medical decisions, all financial decisions. If he becomes a problem, there are facilities. Long-term care places where nobody asks questions. They were sealing their own fate, one recorded word at a time. 35 years prosecuting criminals had taught me exactly what I needed. Now I had it. I remained dressed, sitting in darkness, phone in hand. Night had fully settled beyond my window. Hours until morning. Hours until they'd try to take me to their corrupt psychiatrist. Hours until they discovered what happens when you corner a prosecutor in his own home. I stayed in the dark bedroom long after their voices faded into the low hum of television downstairs. The earbuds were still in the recorder, still running, but the conversation had shifted to mundane things, whether to reheat the chicken, what time to set the alarm. Normalcy. Normalcy performed for an audience of one. I sat on the edge of the bed, fully clothed, shoes on, phone in my lap like a loaded weapon. The house smelled faintly of chamomile and betrayal. At 7:42 p.m. the TV clicked off. Footsteps on the stairs, two sets, deliberate but trying to sound casual. A soft knock. Dad. Just checking if you need anything. Megan's voice syrupy with concern. I didn't answer. I let my breathing stay deep and even, the way a sedated man would breathe. Arnold whispered, "He's out cold. Let's go over the timeline again." They retreated. I waited another 30 seconds, then eased the door open a crack. The hallway was dim, the bathroom light spilling a thin blade across the carpet. I slipped out in socks, avoiding the third step that always creaked. The recorder in the living room was still live. I could hear it through the earbuds like a second conscience. I ghosted down the hall to the home office, the converted garage at the back of the property, hidden behind oak trees, and a side gate Megan had forgotten existed. I'd used it for sensitive files during my prosecutor years. She'd only been inside once, maybe twice when she was little. Arnold had never had reason to know it was there. I unlocked the side door, flipped on the single desk lamp. The room smelled of old paper and dust. Filing cabinets lined one wall. My ancient oak desk commanded the center. A small window faced the driveway, perfect line of sight for arrivals. I arranged two chairs, set the sealed tea bottle under the lamp like crime scene evidence, and texted Stanley. At office. Come to back of property, detached building. Door unlocked. His reply, 20 minutes. While I waited, I cued the recordings on my phone, ready to play in order. The tea bottle caught the light. The cloudy sediment at the bottom looked innocent until you knew what it was. Zulpadam Chen would confirm later. Prescription sedative. Enough to knock out a horse or a 67-year-old man who trusted his daughter. Headlights swept the driveway. Stanley stepped out carrying a laptop and a yellow legal pad, tools of our shared trade. He entered without knocking, looked around at the familiar setup, and set his materials on the desk. Play them, he said simply. I started with Arnold's call to Dr. Martinez. Stanley's expression hardened as Arnold's voice filled the small office. Tomorrow, 10:00 a.m. Confirmed. My father-in-law. You'll evaluate him for competency issues. Provide the documentation we need. $1,500 in cash as agreed. Don't worry, he won't suspect anything. Trusting old man. Then the post-drugging confession, every word of their plan laid bare. The guardianship scheme, the property seizure, the callous assessment of me as obstacle and resource. Stanley opened his laptop, fingers flying across the keys. PC 182, conspiracy to commit fraud. The drugging attempt, that's PC 347, administering a controlled substance to aid commission of a felony. The bribe to the psychiatrist is PC 67.5. He looked up, meeting my eyes. Thad, they're looking at 3 to 4 years minimum each. Good. The word came flat, emotionless. 35 years prosecuting had taught me to separate law from feeling. This was simply consequence meeting action. More headlights. Detective Danielle Chen's unmarked sedan pulled up, 2 uniformed officers with her. She entered briskly, badge clipped to her belt, field test kit in hand. Mr. Brooks. She shook my hand, firm grip, professional respect. I reviewed the audio files you sent. Now I need to see the physical evidence. I handed her the bottle. She held it to the light, examining the cloudiness, then opened her kit. A small glass vial, reagent, drops a testing strip. She added liquid from the bottle. We watched the chemical reaction, blue-purple, bloomed instantly. Zulpadium, prescription sedative. She photographed the result with her phone, documented time and date in a small notebook. That's PC 347. administering a drug to aid commission of a felony, possession with intent to incapacitate. Stanley leaned forward. Danielle, what's your recommendation on timing? Chen set down the bottle, crossed her arms. We have enough for arrest warrants right now. Conspiracy, attempted drugging. The recordings provide probable cause. She paused, eyes moving between Stanley and me. But I recommend we let them proceed to the doctor's office tomorrow. When they hand over cash and accept fraudulent documents, we arrest all three: your daughter, her husband, and Dr. Martinez. Catches them mid-crime. No defense attorney can argue they changed their minds or were just talking. Stanley nodded slowly. From a prosecution standpoint, Danielle's right. Catching them with cash in hand, receiving falsified medical documentation, that's incontrovertible. Actions, not just words. I understood the strategy immediately. Maximum charges, minimum wiggle room for defense. Every element of the crime completed before intervention. I'll act compliant when Megan wakes me tomorrow morning, I said. I'll go to the doctor's office with them. You'll be following. My team establishes surveillance on your house at 6 a.m., Chen replied. When you leave with them, we follow at a distance. You're never at risk. We'll be close. Her voice carried absolute certainty. Once they complete the transaction with Martinez, we move in immediately. What about Martinez's location? Stanley asked. We don't have an address. We'll follow them there, Chen said. Better for our case anyway, shows their willingness to complete the crime without coercion. Plus, it protects Mr. Brooks's position. If we arrested Martinez beforehand, they might suspect something. She pulled out a tactical radio, spoke briefly to the officers waiting by the door. They nodded, stepped outside. Through the window, I watched them walk the perimeter, assessing angles and cover points. Surveillance positions established by Dawn. Chen continued. Unmarked vehicles, plain clothes. You won't see us, but we'll have eyes on every exit. When do you expect them to wake you? Megan said. The appointment was mid-morning, probably around 9, giving time to get me dressed and cooperative. Perfect. That gives us 3 hours of daylight surveillance before movement. She made notes in her phone. Mr. Brooks, tomorrow will be difficult. You'll need to maintain the performance. I thought about decades of witnesses' performances. I'd evaluated lies. I'd dissected in cross-examination. I can do that. Stanley closed his laptop. I'll have emergency restraining orders ready to file the moment they're arrested. Asset protection. Injunctions against property transfer. Your inheritance will be protected. Chen packed up her test kit, sealed the tea bottle in an evidence bag. We move at 6 a.m. Stay in your room tonight. Maintain the pretense. When she wakes you, you're groggy, compliant, trusting. Can you do that? I understand. The weight of it settled across my shoulders. One more act, one final deception before the curtain fell. They left together, tail lights disappearing down the driveway. I locked the office, crossed the dark lawn, back to the house. The television was still off. They hadn't moved, hadn't suspected. I slipped through the back door, up the stairs, avoiding the creaking third step. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and checked my phone. Midnight approaching. Hours until dawn. Hours until Megan would knock with false concern and real malice. Everything was ready. Now came the waiting. The planning session extended past midnight. Chen outlined tactical positions: 2 unmarked cars on adjacent streets. 1 officer on foot near the property line, radio protocols for silent communication. Stanley reviewed the legal filings he'd prepared: emergency protective orders, asset freeze paperwork, guardianship challenge documents. Each piece positioned to deploy the moment arrests were made. Your inheritance will be locked down within an hour of their arrest. Stanley explained, stylus moving across his tablet screen. No transfers, no sins, no access. The probate court takes elder fraud seriously. They'll grant the freeze immediately. Chen added details about post-arrest procedure. We'll process them separately. Standard interrogation technique. Let them wonder what the other is saying. The recordings give us leverage. Most suspects crack when they hear their own voices played back. I listened, asked technical questions, made notes. But underneath the professional exchange, something else churned. These were preparations for my daughter's arrest. For watching her handcuffed, read her rights taken away in a police vehicle. The thought should have broken me. Maybe it would have before I'd heard her voice discussing nursing homes and asset seizures like I was already dead. "We're set," Chen finally said, standing. 6:00 a.m. "My team moves into position. You stay in character until we give the signal. Once they're in custody, you're free." I shook hands with both of them. Stanley's grip lingered, his eyes searching mine for signs of collapse. He wouldn't find any. Not yet. They left through the back door, engines starting quietly in the night. I watched their lights disappear, then crossed the lawn one final time. The grass was wet with evening dew soaking through my socks. Small detail, mundane sensation. I catalogued it anyway, this ordinary moment in an extraordinary night. Inside, the television had been turned off. The house lay dark and silent. They'd gone to bed satisfied with their progress, dreaming of Malibu villas and Santa Monica condos they'd never touch. I climbed the stairs, returned to my bedroom, locked the door. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and let myself feel it. Megan, my daughter. The little girl who'd skinned her knee learning to ride a bike, who'd brought me terrible drawings I'd hung on the refrigerator, who'd cried in my arms when her mother left. Somewhere between that child and this woman, something had broken. Or maybe it had never been whole to begin with. I pulled up a photo on my phone. Megan at 8 years old. Gap-toothed smile, my arm around her shoulders at the park. We looked happy. Maybe we had been in that frozen moment. Maybe it was always performance. Even then. The grief came sharp and sudden. I let it land, let it cut, then deliberately set it aside. Tomorrow required focus. Tomorrow required the prosecutor, not the father. The law didn't care about broken hearts. It cared about evidence and consequence. I checked my phone. 12:47. Stanley's text. "Try to rest. You'll need it." Chen's message followed, team briefed. "Positions confirmed for 600. You're not alone in this." But I was alone. That was the truth underneath all the tactical planning and legal frameworks. My family had become my adversaries. My home had become a crime scene. The people who should have protected me had plotted my destruction. I was 67 years old, sitting in darkness, preparing to watch my daughter arrested. The isolation felt absolute. I lay back on the bed, still fully clothed, phone on my chest. Sleep wouldn't come. I knew that. Instead, I ran through tomorrow's performance step by step. Groggy when she wakes me, confused but compliant. Trusting because that's what they expected. The old man who drinks drug tea and follows instructions. Outside my window, the neighborhood lay quiet. Streetlights cast shadows across the ceiling. Somewhere out there, Chen's surveillance team would be arriving in a few hours. Stanley would be awake too, reviewing his filings, making sure every legal protection was airtight. And here in this bedroom, where I'd lived alone for 2 years of retirement, where I'd imagined my remaining years passing peacefully, I waited for dawn to bring the final confrontation. My phone screen glowed in the darkness. 1:32, then 1:45, 2:00. Time moved with deliberate cruelty. Each minute, a separate eternity. I thought about James. My brother who'd left me $5 million and a note. For the brother who always did the right thing. He'd known something about doing right even when it hurt, even when it cost. This was right. I knew it with prosecutorial certainty. They'd planned elder abuse, conspiracy, fraud. They'd drugged me or tried to. They'd spoken about nursing homes and asset seizures with casual cruelty. The law required consequence. Justice demanded response. But knowing it was right didn't make it easier. 15. 3:48. 21. The darkness outside began its slow shift toward gray. Not sunrise yet, just the first suggestion that night couldn't last forever. Somewhere in the house, Megan and Arnold slept peacefully, convinced their plan was proceeding perfectly. They didn't know that justice like dawn was inevitable. I remained motionless, phone in hand, waiting. The longest night of my life crawling toward its conclusion. Soon, Chen's team would be in position. Soon, Megan would knock on my door. Soon, the final act would begin. But for now, in these last hours of darkness, I simply existed in the space between what had been and what was coming. A father preparing to prosecute his daughter. A victim setting a trap for his attackers. A prosecutor ensuring the law reached everyone, even those who shared his blood. The phone screen read 5:57. Dawn couldn't come fast enough. The clock on my phone read 5:57 when I finally set it face down on the nightstand. The room was still dark, but the kind of dark that has already begun to thin like ink diluted in water. Outside, the first bird gave a tentative chirp, then another. Dawn was assembling itself in pieces, a pale stripe along the curtains, the soft graying of the ceiling, the slow return of shape to the furniture. I had not slept. I had not even closed my eyes for more than a blink. Every time I tried, I saw Megan's 8-year-old face, superimposed on the woman who had carried drugged tea up the stairs. I sat up, spine cracking like old floorboards. My mouth tasted of metal and yesterday's coffee. The house was silent except for the refrigerator's low drone downstairs and the occasional creak of beams cooling after the night. I pictured Arnold and Megan in the guest room, tangled in sheets, dreaming of Malibu sunsets they would never see. The image should have enraged me. Instead, it hollowed me out the way a prosecutor feels when the verdict is read, and the defendant's mother collapses in the gallery. You win the case, but the room still smells of grief. I stood careful not to let the bed springs announce me. The floor was cold under bare feet. I had kicked off my socks sometime after Chen and Stanley left. I padded to the window and parted the curtains an inch. The street was empty, but I knew it wasn't. Somewhere in the shadows of the jacarandas, Chen's team was already in place. Unmarked sedans, plainclothes officers sipping cold coffee radios, whispering coordinates. They were ghosts, keeping watch over a house that no longer felt like home. I let the curtain fall back and moved to the dresser. The top drawer still held the photograph I had avoided looking at for months. Megan's college graduation cap tassel, swinging my arm around her shoulders, both of us squinting into the sun. I picked it up. The paper was soft from handling. In the dimness, her smile looked almost real. I remembered the day, how proud I'd been, how I'd teased her about the mortarboard, making her look like a judge. She had laughed and said, "Maybe one day, Dad. But I'll be the one behind the bench." I had believed her. I had believed in her. I set the photo face down. Some truths are easier to bear when they're not staring back at you. My phone buzzed, once Stanley checking in. All quiet. Chen confirms 2 units on station. "You good?" I typed back. "Good." 1 word. It was all I had. I opened the closet and pulled out the small leather notebook I'd carried since 1987. The cover was cracked, the elastic band long gone. Inside were grocery lists, case numbers. Megan's childhood dentist appointments, a pressed violet from the day she learned to ride a 2-wheeler. I flipped to a blank page and wrote the date in the top right corner, Saturday, May 17th. Then in the same block letters I'd used for search warrant applications, I listed tomorrow's performance beats. Wake up. Groggy, disoriented. Grateful for Megan's concern. Breakfast, eat slowly, spill a little coffee. Sell the lingering sedative. Car ride. Sit in back seat, stare out window, occasional confused question. Doctor's office. Answer. Martinez's questions wrong on purpose. Let Megan help me. Arrest, stay in character until Chen's signal, then drop the mask. I underlined the last line twice. The prosecutor in me approved of the structure. The father in me wanted to tear the page out and burn it. I closed the notebook and slipped it into my shirt pocket next to the recorder that had already captured more than enough to bury them. The device was warm from my body heat. I wondered if it could feel the weight of what it held. Downstairs, a door opened the guest room. Soft footsteps, the bathroom light flicking on the hiss of the shower. Arnold, probably. Megan would follow in 20 minutes. She had always needed more time in the morning. I pictured her standing under the water, rehearsing the lies she would tell me in a few hours. Just a routine checkup, Dad. Nothing to worry about. I wondered if she would cry when the cuffs went on. I wondered if I would. I sat on the edge of the bed again and let the memories come because fighting them was pointless now. They arrived in no particular order, the way evidence does in a cold case file. Megan at 6, losing her first tooth, running to me with blood on her lip and triumph in her eyes. Megan at 12, slamming her bedroom door after her mother left, screaming that she hated me for not stopping it. Megan at 22, calling from the ER after a car accident, whispering "Daddy" like she was 6 again. Megan, 8 months ago, standing in this same hallway with Arnold's duffel bag, eyes red from crying, saying they had nowhere else to go. Each memory carried its own small wound. I had failed her somewhere along the line. Maybe when I chose late nights at the office over her soccer games, maybe when I taught her that justice was absolute, but never showed her that mercy could be too. Or maybe the failure was hers. Maybe some people are born with a moral fracture that widens under pressure. I would never know. The luxury of understanding had been forfeited the moment she measured my life in dollars. The shower shut off. A drawer opened and closed. The mundane sounds of a household preparing for a Saturday that would end in handcuffs. I stood and moved to the mirror above the dresser. The man looking back was 67, going on 100, gray stubble, eyes sunken, mouth set in a line I recognized from 1,000 mugshots. I practiced the groggy blink, the confused half-smile. Who am I? Where are we going? I looked convincing. I looked like the trusting old man they expected. My phone buzzed again. Chen this time. Team in position. Thermal shows 2 heat signatures in guest room 1 in kitchen. You're covered. I typed copy. Then, because I needed to say it to someone, thank you. Her reply was immediate. We've got your back, counselor. Counselor, the nickname from my ADA days. It landed like a hand on my shoulder. I opened the bedroom door a crack. The hallway smelled of coffee, Arnold's doing. I could hear the clink of a mug, the rustle of a newspaper. Normal sounds, domestic sounds, the kind that made you believe the world was still in order. I closed the door and leaned against it. My heart was beating too fast. I focused on slowing it the way I'd once coached nervous witnesses. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The rhythm steadied me. I was not the victim here. I was the architect of what came next. I thought about James again. My brother, who had died alone in a Florida condo while I complained about water bills. He had seen something in me worth $4 million and a handwritten note. For the brother who always did the right thing. I had spent my life defining right in courtrooms and statutes in the cold language of law. Tonight it meant something smaller and more brutal, protecting myself from the people I had sworn to protect. I moved to the window again. The sky had shifted to the color of weak tea. A sprinkler kicked on across the street, painting the lawn in silver arcs. The ordinary world was waking up, unaware that 3 lives were about to be dismantled in a shabby medical office 10 miles away. I thought about the moment the cuffs would close. Megan's face when she realized the groggy old man had been playing her all along. Arnold's bluster collapsing into silence. Dr. Martinez dropping the envelope like it was on fire. I rehearsed my own lines in my head. I heard everything, Megan, every word, every plan. This is what happens when you bet against a prosecutor. I would deliver them calmly the way I'd once delivered closing arguments. No yelling, no tears. Just facts, just consequence. But beneath the rehearsal, the father in me was screaming. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass and let the scream out in silence. Why Megan? Why wasn't I enough? The question had no answer, only echoes. The hallway floorboards creaked. Megan now. Lighter steps, the bathroom door again, the ritual of toothpaste and mascara. I pictured her in the mirror practicing her own performance, the concerned daughter, the loving caregiver. I wondered if she felt anything at all or if the role had swallowed the person. I returned to the bed and sat hands on my knees. The recorder in my pocket was still warm. I pressed the heel of my hand against it, grounding myself. Evidence. That was my anchor now. Not love, not memory, just the cold, irrefutable weight of truth. 4:42 a.m. The sun breached the horizon, spilling pale gold across the carpet. I watched it crawl toward the bed like a cautious witness. Soon the knock would come, soon the final act would begin. I closed my eyes not to sleep, but to listen. The house was waking up around me, every sound a reminder of what I was about to lose. The coffee maker gurgled. A drawer slid open. Megan hummed something tuneless in the shower. Arnold cleared his throat. I breathed in the smell of coffee and shampoo, and the faint ghost of chamomile still clinging to my shirt. I let it all settle into my bones. This was the last morning my daughter would ever wake up in my house as a free woman. This was the last morning I would wake up as her father. I opened my eyes. The sun had reached the foot of the bed. The day had begun. I smoothed the wrinkles from my shirt and waited for the knock. It came at 8:27. The knock came at 8:27. Soft but insistent, the way Megan used to knock when she wanted permission to stay up past bedtime. Dad, time to wake up. Her voice floated through the door, bright with rehearsed cheer. I scheduled that doctor's appointment for you. 10 o'clock, remember? You said yesterday you wanted to get your blood pressure checked. I had been sitting on the edge of the bed for hours, fully dressed, shoes-laced recorder warm against my chest. I lay back, quickly arranged myself like a man surfacing from deep drugged sleep, pillow, dented one arm flung over my eyes. When she cracked the door, I blinked slowly, raised a hand to my forehead, as if the light hurt. I asked for an appointment. My voice came thick, confused, the exact register of a man still tasting sedative. I don't remember saying that. I let the sentence trail off, looked at her with uncertainty. Must be getting old. But if you scheduled it, we should go. You're taking care of me. Relief flooded her face so completely I almost believed it myself. She believed me, believed the fog was real, that the tea had done its work. That's right, Dad. Just a routine check. She stepped inside, already dressed in a neat linen blouse and slacks, respectable daughter attire. Get dressed and come down for breakfast. Nothing heavy. I moved slowly, deliberately, fumbling with buttons, taking twice as long as necessary. Every gesture was calculated to reinforce their confidence. The old man who needed help with his socks, who squinted at the mirror like the reflection confused him. Megan hovered in the hallway, offering gentle prompts. Left shoe first, Dad. There you go. When I finally descended, Arnold stood in the kitchen, wearing a smile that never reached his eyes. Morning, Thaddeus. Coffee's ready and I made toast. He pulled out my chair with exaggerated care. This inheritance of yours, $5 million. We should celebrate properly. After the doctor gives you a clean bill of health, let's go somewhere nice. My treat. We're family after all. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Family. The word had meant something once. That sounds nice, I said, accepting the coffee cup with slightly trembling hands, another calculated gesture. Very nice. We ate quickly, all of us pretending normalcy. Megan touched my arm periodically with false affection. Arnold discussed restaurants and celebration plans. I played the part, grateful, trusting, slightly confused. The prosecutor in me catalogued every detail, while the father in me died a little more with each lie. We left the house shortly before 9:55. Arnold insisted I sit in the back seat, more comfortable for you, while he drove. Control, always control. I didn't protest, just settled into the leather and stared out the window like a man watching scenery he no longer recognized. The journey took 35 minutes through progressively deteriorating neighborhoods. Pasadena's tree-lined streets gave way to commercial strips, then industrial areas. Finally, cracked stucco buildings with barred windows and faded signs. This wasn't where legitimate doctors practiced. This was where desperate people came for procedures they couldn't get legally. At a stoplight, I glanced in the side mirror and caught sight of a gray sedan 3 cars back. Detective Chen. Relief washed through me, silent, invisible backup, my lifeline. We pulled up to a shabby 2-story building just after 10:15. The sign read Medical Offices, but half the letters had peeled away. Arnold parked in a potholed lot beside a rusted dumpster. "Help me from the car," I said, letting my voice waver. He took my elbow with theatrical concern. We climbed narrow stairs that smelled of mildew and old cigarette smoke. The second-floor hallway was lit by a single flickering fluorescent tube. A door marked Martinez Medical Consulting stood ajar. The waiting room held outdated magazines, cracked vinyl chairs, and no receptionist, no other patients. Martinez appeared almost immediately, nervous-looking man in his 50s, doctor's coat over street clothes, eyes darting to Arnold, then me, then away. "Mr. Brooks, please come in." His voice wavered. "I'm Dr. Martinez. Your daughter tells me you've been having some memory issues. Let's do a quick evaluation. Nothing to worry about." I shuffled into the examination room, let Megan guide me to a chair. The walls were nicotine yellow. A diploma from a school I'd never heard of hung crookedly beside a poster about hypertension. Martinez pulled out a clipboard, began asking basic questions. "What year is it?" I paused, frowned. 1992. Megan squeezed my shoulder. "It's 25, Dad. Remember we talked about it." "Location." I looked around vaguely. Hospital. Arnold leaned in the doorway, arms folded, watching the performance with satisfaction. "Simple math problems," I answered slowly, hesitantly, occasionally glancing at Megan for confirmation. She nodded encouragingly, playing devoted daughter while I played confused old man. 15 minutes, that was all his thorough evaluation took. Then he set down the clipboard and turned to Megan and Arnold, avoiding my eyes. "Mrs. Watson. Mr. Watson. I need to speak with you about your father's condition." His expression was practiced concern. "He's demonstrating clear signs of cognitive decline, memory lapses, confusion, difficulty with complex reasoning. In my professional opinion, he requires supervised care. I recommend pursuing legal guardianship immediately." Arnold leaned forward eagerly. "We appreciate your thoroughness, Doctor. We've been concerned about him living alone, managing his finances with his recent inheritance, significant assets. We need to ensure everything is properly managed." His hand moved to his jacket pocket. "You'll provide the documentation we need." Martinez nodded, pulled out pre-printed forms from his desk drawer. Competency evaluation, recommendation for guardianship, medical justification, everything they'd need for court. Arnold's smile widened. He reached into his jacket, extracted a white envelope, thick, crisp. The envelope I knew contained $1,500 in cash, payment for fraud, payment for selling his professional ethics, payment for helping destroy an old man's autonomy. "As we discussed," Arnold said, extending the envelope. Martinez reached for it, fingers inches from the exchange. This was it, the crime completed. Every element in place: conspiracy, fraud, bribery, elder abuse, all captured, documented, ready for prosecution. I touched my jacket pocket, felt the weight of my phone. Chen was outside, Stanley nearby. Justice was seconds away. Arnold's fingers released the envelope. Martinez's hand closed around it. The transaction completed. The door burst open. "Police! Nobody move!" Detective Chen entered, first badge, raised voice like a gavel. Two uniformed officers behind her, weapons drawn but low. Martinez dropped the envelope like it burned. Cash scattered across the linoleum. Visible, countable, irrefutable evidence. "Hands where I can see them," Chen barked. "All of you hands up now." Arnold stood, face draining of color. "What is this?" "We're at a medical appointment. You're under arrest." Chen moved toward him with handcuffs ready. "Arnold Watson, you're being charged with conspiracy to commit elder fraud, attempted administration of controlled substances, and bribery of a medical professional." "Turn around." "This is insane," Arnold's voice climbed. "We haven't done anything." "Tell them, Martinez. Tell them this is legitimate." But Martinez had his hands raised, eyes wide with panic. "I want a lawyer. I'm not saying anything. I want a lawyer right now." Megan turned to me, her face crumbling like wet paper. "Dad, what's happening? Why are the police here?" I stood slowly, dropping the confused elderly man act like a discarded costume. When I spoke, my voice carried 35 years of prosecutorial weight. Calm, precise, final. "I heard you, Megan, through the window yesterday afternoon. I heard everything." The color drained from her face. "You? What? The nursing home, the drugged coffee, the psychiatrist bribe, your husband discussing me like I was already dead." I kept my voice level, factual. I heard every word, and I recorded all of it. "No." She shook her head frantically. "No, Dad. You don't understand. I understand perfectly." I pulled out my phone, held it up. California Penal Code 368 Elder Abuse. PC 182 Conspiracy. PC 347 Administering drugs to commit a felony. You're looking at 3 to 4 years in prison minimum. Arnold lunged toward the door. The officer caught him, forced him against the wall. "Assault on an officer," Chen said flatly. "That's another charge." Chen finished handcuffing Arnold, moved to Megan. "Megan Brooks. Watson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder fraud and attempted administration of controlled substances." "Dad, please." Megan's voice broke. "I'm your daughter. You can't do this to me. You did this to yourself." The words came cold. "Final. You chose this when you decided I was an obstacle instead of a person. When you put a sedative in my tea. When you planned to lock me away and steal everything I had." Chen read them their rights while officers secured Martinez. The medical forms, the cash, the clipboard with falsified notes, everything collected as evidence. Through the office window I saw more patrol cars. Crime scene techs arriving. Stanley appeared in the doorway, legal folders under his arm. His eyes met mine, a moment of shared professional satisfaction. Cases like this, clean evidence, clear charges, criminals caught in the act, were the ones that restored faith in the system. "Assets frozen," Stanley told me quietly. "Emergency protective orders filed. Your will has been amended. Megan's removed as beneficiary. Everything's protected." They took Megan and Arnold to separate patrol cars. Through the window I watched my daughter handcuffed, crying, being read her rights in a parking lot in the worst part of Los Angeles. She looked back once, seeking my face, perhaps hoping for rescue. I turned away. Detective Chen drove me to the station for my official statement. 3 hours of testimony documenting everything: the overheard conversation, the recordings, the drugged tea, the fraudulent medical appointment. The stenographer captured every word, chain of evidence meticulously preserved. "There'll be an arraignment Monday morning," Chen told me when we finished. "Bail will be high given the charges. Your restraining order prohibits contact. They can't call you, can't approach you, can't ask for help." Good. The word felt insufficient but true. Stanley walked me to my car in the station parking lot. "You did the right thing, Thad. You know that, right?" "I know." I gripped my keys, looked at the late afternoon sun. Doesn't make it feel better. It's not supposed to feel better. It's just supposed to be right. The drive home took 40 minutes. Traffic weekend shoppers, ordinary people living ordinary lives. I parked in my driveway, entered my house empty now. Truly empty. No daughter cooking dinner, no son-in-law watching television. Just silence and the ghosts of what should have been. I sat at the kitchen table and made the necessary calls. Amber Foster, the notary. The will needs immediate revision. Remove Megan Brooks Watson completely. I'll designate alternate beneficiaries. Stanley. Begin. Divorce proceedings on her behalf if needed. I want no legal connections remaining. My bank freeze all accounts pending investigation. Practical steps. Forward motion. The things you do when family becomes enemy and justice becomes necessity. Evening settled over Pasadena. In my quiet house I poured a glass of water, just water. Nothing hidden, nothing dangerous, and stood at the kitchen window. Somewhere across the city, Megan sat in a holding cell, Arnold beside her, or separate, both facing reality. Martinez awaiting arraignment. All of them learning that consequences are real, that theft has a price, that betraying trust carries weight. I had won. The law had functioned. Evidence had prevailed. Justice had been served. But victory tasted like ash. The house was too quiet the night after the arrests. Not the comfortable quiet of a man alone with his thoughts, but the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and makes you wonder if you've gone deaf. I stood in the kitchen at 9:17 p.m., glass of water in hand, staring at the spot on the counter where Megan's purse had sat for the last 8 months. It was gone now, taken into evidence, along with Arnold's phone, the envelope of cash, the falsified medical forms. The absence of her things felt like a fresh wound, raw and unexpected. I set the glass down untouched and walked through the rooms one by one, as if taking inventory of a life that had already ended. The living room still smelled faintly of her lavender hand lotion. The guest room, formerly Megan's childhood bedroom, held the indentations of their bodies in the mattress, the faint outline of Arnold's shoes by the closet. I opened the closet door and found a single sock gray with a hole in the toe. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands like it might speak, then dropped it into the trash bag I carried. Evidence of their presence eliminated one item at a time. The trash bag filled quickly. Her hairbrush, his razor, the half-empty bottle of Arnold's cologne that had made my eyes water every morning. I tied the bag, carried it to the curb, and left it there under the streetlight like an offering to the night. When I came back inside, the house felt marginally cleaner, but the silence had grown heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I slept in fits and starts, waking every hour to check the locks, the windows, the shadows in the hallway. At 3:42 a.m., I found myself in Megan's old room again, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling from when she was 10. I had put them up myself, standing on a chair with a tube of adhesive, following her precise instructions. Orion, here Dad. The Big Dipper needs to be bigger. They had faded to a sickly yellow, but in the dark they still held a faint phosphorescence, like memories that refused to die completely. I reached up and peeled one off. The adhesive gave way with a soft rip. I held the star in my palm, a cheap plastic disc no bigger than a quarter, and felt the absurdity of it all, a 67-year-old retired prosecutor sitting in the dark with a child's toy, trying to understand where love had gone wrong. Morning came gray and overcast, the kind of May weather that forgets it's supposed to be spring. I made coffee out of habit, then poured it down the sink because the smell reminded me of the drugged tea. I settled for water instead, straight from the tap, cold enough to sting my teeth. Stanley called at 8:05. Arraignment set for Monday 9 a.m. All three pleaded not guilty standard. Bail hearing immediately after. DAs pushing for high bail given the elder abuse angle and flight risk. Martinez has priors. This isn't his first rodeo. And Megan? My voice sounded like someone else's. Public defender. She's cooperative. Asked if you were coming to the hearing. I closed my eyes. Tell her no. Already did. I spent the day in mechanical motion. I called the bank again, confirmed the asset freeze was in place. I met with Amber Foster at her office and signed the revised will everything to a trust for elder abuse victims, a scholarship fund in James's name, a small bequest to Stanley's pro bono program. Megan's name appeared nowhere. The pen felt heavy in my hand, but I signed without hesitation. Paperwork was easier than people. By afternoon, the house was spotless, every trace of them erased. I even washed the guest room sheets twice, as if hot water and detergent could scrub away the betrayal. When I finished, I stood in the doorway and realized the room looked exactly as it had before they arrived, neutral, impersonal, waiting for occupants who would never come. I drove to the station at 4:30 to give a supplemental statement. Chen met me in the same interview room, coffee in hand this time. "Martinez is talking," she said without preamble. "Rolled on your daughter and son-in-law within an hour. Says they approached him 3 weeks ago, offered $1,500 for the evaluation, another $1,000 if he'd testify in guardianship court. He's got texts, emails, the works. We're adding obstruction of justice to his charges." And Megan Chen's expression softened a fraction. "She's not talking yet. Keeps asking for you. Says if you'd just explain you could make it go away." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. She still thinks I'm her get-out-of-jail-free card. Some habits die hard. I signed the statement, initialed the evidence log, and left with a copy of the arrest report folded in my pocket. The weight of it was comforting, like a verdict in my favor. The weekend passed in a blur of small, necessary tasks. I changed the locks. I forwarded their mail to Stanley's office. I deleted Megan's number from my phone, then restored it from backup because I couldn't bring myself to erase the photos. I kept those in a hidden album labeled Before. Monday morning, I woke before dawn, dressed in the same suit I'd worn to James's funeral, and drove downtown. I didn't go to the courthouse. I couldn't bear to see her in orange, but I parked across the street and watched the news vans gather. Stanley texted updates every 15 minutes, 9:12. All 3 in custody, shackled. 9:27. Martinez bail set at $250K, remanded. 9:41. Arnold's bail $500K, remanded. Flight risk. 9:58. Megan's bail $350K. Public defender requested lower, denied, remanded. I read the last message twice, then drove home. The sky had cleared to a hard, indifferent blue. The days began to blur. I woke at the same time, made the same coffee I didn't drink, walked the same route through the neighborhood. The jacarandas were blooming again, purple carpets underfoot, and I hated them for their beauty. Everything felt like a reminder. The park bench where I'd planned the trap, the coffee shop where Megan and I used to split blueberry muffins, the mailbox where I'd found James's will. I avoided people. The neighbors who waved got a nod at best. The cashier at the grocery store asked if I was okay. I paid for my bananas and left without answering. I became a ghost in my own life, moving through rooms that echoed with absence. One evening in early June, I found myself in the home office, the detached garage where I'd met with Stanley and Chen. The desk lamp still worked. The filing cabinet still held 35 years of case files. I opened one at random, the Martinez elder fraud case from 2009, the one Stanley and I had prosecuted together. The son had drugged his mother with Haldol, forged power of attorney, drained her accounts. We'd put him away for 4 years. I remembered the mother's testimony, frail voice, trembling hands thanking us for giving her back her dignity. I closed the file and opened another. And another. Pattern after pattern, greed dressed up as concern, love twisted into leverage. I had spent my career fighting this exact crime, and now I was its survivor. The irony was a stone in my chest. I started writing letters I never sent. To Megan, mostly. Pages of questions I knew would never be answered. When did I become disposable to you? Was it the money or was it always me? Do you remember the stars on your ceiling? I burned them in the backyard fire pit, watching the paper curl and blackened the words disappearing into smoke. The ashes felt like confession. July brought heat and the first court date. Stanley attended. I stayed home. The preliminary hearing lasted 3 days. Martinez took a plea 2 years testimony against Megan and Arnold. The DA offered Megan a deal plead to felony elder abuse, 3 years probation restitution. She refused. Arnold followed her lead. Trial was set for October. I followed the news the way other people follow sports. Every article a small victory, every delay a fresh ache. The Malibu villa sold at auction, proceeds locked in trust, pending outcome. The Santa Monica condos followed. James's money safe from their hands, but no longer mine either. It belonged to the cause now, to strangers who would never know his name. Summer faded into a September that felt like November. I gained weight, then lost it. My suits hung loose. I gave them to charity. I bought new ones in smaller sizes and hated the mirror for reflecting the truth. I was shrinking physically and otherwise. One night in late September, I drove to the county jail unannounced. Visiting hours were over, but I sat in the parking lot anyway, staring at the barbed wire and the floodlights. I imagined Megan inside, wearing orange, eating meals from plastic trays, learning the hierarchy of survival. I wondered if she thought of me. I wondered if she hated me. I wondered if hate was easier than regret. I drove home without going inside. October arrived with the trial. I attended every day, sitting in the back row, anonymous in a sea of spectators. Megan saw me on the third day. Our eyes met across the courtroom. Hers were red-rimmed, mine dry. She looked away first. The evidence was overwhelming: the recordings, the drugged tea, the cash, Martinez's testimony, text messages, bank records showing their $300,000 debt. The defense tried to paint me as a vindictive father, but the jury wasn't buying. 12 citizens who'd seen enough elder abuse in their own families to recognize the pattern. Closing arguments were on a Friday. The prosecutor, a young woman I'd mentored years ago, delivered a masterclass. She played the recording of Megan's voice. "He's still my father." Then Arnold's, "He's an obstacle." The courtroom was silent except for the tape. When it ended, the foreman requested the recordings be replayed during deliberations. The verdict came Monday morning. Guilty on all counts. Megan collapsed when the foreman read elder abuse. Arnold stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Sentencing was set for December. I left before the families reacted. The hallway outside smelled of floor wax and desperation. Stanley caught up with me at the elevators. "You okay?" I considered the question. "I will be." December 18th, sentencing day. I wore the new suit, the one that fit. The courtroom was packed: reporters, victims, advocates, a few curious retirees. Megan and Arnold were brought in separately. She had lost weight. Her jumpsuit hung on her frame. Arnold's hair had gone grayer in custody. The judge, a woman I'd appeared before dozens of times, didn't mince words. This was a calculated, prolonged betrayal of the most sacred trust. The victim is not only elderly, but a retired prosecutor who dedicated his life to protecting others from exactly this crime. The court will not tolerate such predation. Arnold, 4 years, state prison, $350,000 restitution, permanent protective order. Megan, 3 years probation, intensive therapy, $300,000 restitution, permanent protective order. No contact with victim. When the gavel fell, Megan looked at me one last time. Her mouth formed my name, Dad, but no sound came out. I stood and left without responding. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone, eating takeout turkey in front of a football game I didn't watch. The house was decorated with nothing but dust. I received cards from former colleagues. A fruit basket from the DA's office, a handwritten note from Chen Justice served. "You made it possible." I framed the note and hung it in the office next to the old case files. Spring returned, tentative and green. The jacarandas bloomed again, and this time I didn't hate them. I walked beneath their canopy every morning, letting the petals collect in my hair like purple snow. I started volunteering at the senior center, teaching legal literacy, helping widows navigate probate, spotting the early signs of financial abuse. The work felt like penance and purpose in equal measure. One afternoon in April, I received a letter forwarded through Stanley's office. No return address, postmarked from a women's correctional facility in Northern California. I recognized the handwriting immediately. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten drugged tea, and opened it with steady hands. Dad, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if I deserve for you to. I think about you every day. About the stars on my ceiling. About the bike you taught me to ride. About the way you used to leave notes in my lunchbox. I was drowning, Dad. The debt, the shame, Arnold's promises. I let it pull me under and I dragged you with me. I told myself it was survival. It wasn't. It was cowardice. I'm in therapy now. Real therapy, not the kind you buy for $1,500. I'm learning that love isn't a transaction. I'm learning that I broke something that can't be fixed with apologies. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know I remember who you were to me before I forgot. I'm sorry. Megan. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, placed it in the leather notebook beside the pressed violet, and closed the cover. That night, I drove to Malibu. The villa had sold, but the beach was public. I walked the shoreline until the houses disappeared, and there was only sand and stars and the endless hush of waves. I stood at the water's edge and let the Pacific soak my shoes, the cold seeping through wool and leather to my skin. I thought about James's note. For the brother who always did the right thing. I thought about the stars on Megan's ceiling, now packed away in a box in the garage. I thought about the empty rooms in my house waiting for a purpose I hadn't found yet. I took the glow-in-the-dark star from my pocket, the one I'd peeled from her ceiling months ago, and held it up to the moonlight. It caught the faint glow, a tiny constellation in my palm. Then I threw it as far as I could into the surf. It disappeared without a sound. The waves kept coming, indifferent and eternal. I stood there until my feet went numb, until the sky began to pale in the east. When I finally turned to walk back, the sand had washed away my footprints. The beach looked untouched, as if I'd never been there at all. I drove home as the sun rose, painting the hills gold. The house was still quiet, but for the first time the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space, room to breathe, room to decide what came next. I made coffee, drank it black, sat at the kitchen table and opened the leather notebook to a fresh page. At the top I wrote Chapter 2. Then I began to write.